Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with the middle grade book tag. This tag was originally created by Amanda from The Curly Reader, and she was also the one who tagged me. I will of course link her original video down below, and I'm so excited to do this. Middle grade March is still going at the time I'm filming this, and I love it. I'm obviously very passionate about middle grade, as I think probably everybody who watches this channel knows by now, but I'm so excited. So let's get into the questions. The first one is, what is the last middle grade book that you read? And because it is middle grade March, I have been reading a ton of middle grade, so I think I just finished this one yesterday, and that is A Mixture of Mischief by Anna Mariano. This is the third and sadly final book in the Love Sugar Magic series, which I absolutely love. I actually buddy read this one with my friend Priscilla from Bookie Charm. I finished it a little bit ahead of her, so I'm sorry Priscilla. I was loving this book so much that I just ended up finishing it. It is on Voices for the Mexican American representation, and we follow our main character Leo, and her family are just so wonderful. Their family has baking magic, which is a thing I discovered I really love reading about. And the first book is about Leo finding out that her family has these powers and deciding that she doesn't want to wait around until she's old enough to be taught about this magic, and she gets into a lot of mischief and trouble along the way. The first book is definitely really good, but I think the second and the third are even better. I don't actually know if the second or the third one is my favorite. I loved all of these books. I love Leo as a main character. She's really kind and clever and funny, and I love her friendships, and like the family in this book is just so well developed. Like the way that they love and support each other, and they definitely fight and disagree, but the way that they are always there for each other when it counts is just really lovely to read about. And I feel like the series handles series ideas in really subtle ways. Of the middle grade books that I have read, it's not one of the most heavy, but there are some pretty heavy topics that do get discussed. Like the second one focuses a lot on grief and on learning to live with the grief of losing people that you love. I just love the series so much, and I probably wasn't supposed to give you like a whole review for it, but I love it. Number 2 is, what is a middle grade book someone read to you as a child? And this one is a series I talk about a lot, but I don't know if I've ever mentioned this particular aspect of it, and that is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. And the thing I don't think I've mentioned is that I think originally this series was one that was read to me. I think it was my 4th and 5th grade teacher who, like, we would do read alouds, and I think she read the first book and possibly even the second book to us, and I don't actually think I liked them very much at the time, which is wild because this is like one of my favorite series now. And I think, like, I don't even remember then how I ended up picking up the rest of the books. I think because I remembered that she had read the first book to us, so like I recognized the series. So I don't know if I was like at the library maybe, and I recognized the series title, so I was like, might as well continue the series. But I just think that's so funny that like this is a series I talk about all the time, but I'd actually forgotten that I had discovered the series through being read to by somebody, and also the fact that I'm not sure I was the biggest fan when I first read it, so it took a while for me to fall in love with it, but when I did, there was no going back. This is my tabbed up copy from our Artemis Fowl read along last year. Number 3 is, what was your favorite middle grade book as a child? And I probably have several I could talk about, but the one that instantly came to mind was The Invisible Day by Martha Jocelyn, and I think this would count as middle grade. It might be like slightly in between like chapter books and middle grade books, because it is for, I think it is like one of the younger ones, but I'm gonna count it. And this is about a girl who finds this like makeup bag in Central Park. She lives in New York, and she, looking back, this is very unhygienic, but she like decides to try on some of the powder or something, and she realizes it turns her invisible and doesn't wear off. She doesn't know how to reverse this, so she has to kind of enlist the help of her friend. I think her friend's name is like Herbert or Humphrey or something like that. So she enlists the help of her friend, and they kind of go on an adventure across New York City, trying to figure out, they're trying to return the bag to the girl who lost it and to see if she knows how she can get uninvisible. And I don't know why this was like such a favorite of mine, but I must have reread this book probably more than 20 times. Like I remember rereading this one over and over. Like there's some scenes I still remember really clearly. Like they were doing book reports on like a country that they had to pick, and her friend, I think her best friend was Chinese, and this other like mean girl had chosen China, even though like he knew a lot more about China than she did, and so there was like that conflict that they were trying to resolve. And like I remember really enjoying this book. I think even at the time when I was little and really loving it, I knew it like wasn't the best book I had read, but for some reason there was something about it that just like kept pulling me back to reread it. Number 4 is, what is your favorite middle grade book as an adult? This is such a difficult question, and when I was pulling my answers together, I knew I had to limit myself to one book per question or I would just never stop. So I'm just going to talk about one of my favorite middle grade books as an adult. That is Starry River of the Sky by Grace Lin. I have not read all 3 of Grace Lin's books, and this is still my favorite of hers. She writes Chinese folklore inspired stories, which is Own Voices, and I just love this book so much. All of her books kind of have similar themes of the importance of storytelling, and they all kind of have different folktales and plot lines that end up connecting in unexpected ways. And she also does her own illustrations that are absolutely lovely. Like the colors in these, let me see if I can find a good example. Like they're just beautiful. I just love the whole experience of reading her books. They're very cozy, but they're also like really heart-wrenching in some places. I think it was when the sea turned to silver that like really surprised me at how like bittersweet and emotional the ending was, but in the best way. I just really love these books, and this one in particular I think I love the most. I think one of the reasons I love it the most is because our main character Rendy is one of those characters who like kind of gets like stranded in this village or this community, and he's like, I'm gonna get out of here as soon as I can. And then he starts like making friends with people and helping people and getting to know like the community and everything. And like gradually he's like, well, I'm gonna wait like one more day. Like I'm gonna wait like one more week. Like I can't leave yet because I have to help this person with this thing. And I just like really love it. That's a trope I really love, where the main character just like gradually gets won over by the people that they're staying with. I don't know, that's like a very specific thing, but I have discovered I really love that. And I loved it in this book as well. Number 5 is who is your favorite middle grade author? And I think everybody knows the answer. Frances Harding. I talk about her all the time. I have a whole recommendations video based on her books, and this is Goldstruck Island, which might be my favorite of hers. It's hard to pick, but this is definitely up there. I have given all of her books 5 stars except for one, which I gave 4.5 stars, and I have a couple that I haven't read from her because I'm stockpiling them. Because I'm ridiculous. But I just love her as an author. She is so good at setting a scene. Her world building is so thorough and thoughtful, and you just get the feeling that like if you asked her a question about any obscure part of the world she's created, she'd be able to answer you. She really tends to write ordinary main characters who just decide like, I'm gonna have to do something. Like I want to protect the people I care about and the rest of the world. I'm gonna do the right thing even though I'm not the chosen one. It's one of my favorite main characters to read about, so I love that she writes them so often. And her books also get categorized kind of all over the place. Like I've seen them with middle grade, I've seen them with young adult, I've even seen them with more like general fiction, which I think is another reason I love her, is like she has so much crossover appeal. Actually reading A Face Like Glass, which was the first book I read from her, that was one of the things kind of made me realize like age range restrictions are kind of nonsense. Because I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with middle grade wouldn't expect this level of complexity from middle grade books, but she never talks down to her audience. Like her child characters are so well developed. The adults also feel important in the story. Like they're not just plot devices to get the kids to where they need to be. I could just go on about her books all day. I recommend everything she's written that I have read. Goldstruck Island is about an island where certain people living on the island have this ability. They're called the Lost, and what they can do is essentially like send out their senses, kind of like temporarily disconnect them from their body, and sort of, I guess, like sort of have an out-of-body experience where they can like go and observe other things. And our main character Hathin, her older sister Arilu is one of these Lost, but Hathin and her family are kind of hiding a secret about Arilu. And then one day there's a terrible accident and all of the other Lost on their island, something happens to them, and Hathin kind of gets pulled into trying to figure out what happened, trying to protect her island from the like invaders or colonizers, because that's another thing this book does really well, I think, is Hathin and her community living on the island. Like they're the indigenous population, and the way they interact with the other people who have like settled there or like colonized there is so thoughtful and interesting. I just think this book has a lot of really wonderful things to say about colonialism, and especially about the role of people who just don't want to make trouble. Like they see that something bad is going on, but they're just like following orders, they're just following the rules. I feel like this was a very disorganized summary, but I love this book. Number 6 is what middle grade book do you think should be required reading in school? And this is hard because required reading or like universal book recommendations are something I have a hard time with. And I'm going to talk about one I think I talked about in a similar context, but that is Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz Ryan. This is a historical fiction book set around the time of, I think it's when the California workers movement was really getting started. And we follow our main character Esperanza, who lives in Mexico, and she's very wealthy, very well off. She has this very like perfect life. And then a tragedy forces her and her mother to flee across the border into California and become migrant workers. And this book talks a lot about immigration and the workers' rights movement, and talks about strikes. And I just love the character growth that Esperanza goes through, because she's very spoiled at the beginning of the book, but as the story goes on, she starts to think about people besides herself. She starts to kind of nurture these good traits that she might have had, but she never bothered to use, basically. And I just love the emphasis on family relationships in this book. Like the connection between Esperanza and her mother and her grandmother, and her grandmother with her mother, are just like these generations of women. You really feel that love and that bond. This is just such a powerful and lovely story, and I think this would be such an important one for kids to read in school, because I think it's a great kind of conversation starter for seeing things from multiple perspectives, because when you see certain workers want to strike, you understand why they want something to change because they live in these horrible conditions, but you can also kind of see it from the perspective of the families who don't want to make trouble because, you know, yes, their life might be bad now, but at least they're getting paid, you know, at least they have money for their family and to feed their family. Even if you agree more with one side or the other, I think they're both done in a way where you can at least understand where the other group is coming from. And I also think the discussion on immigration is so thoughtful and so topical. I just think this book would be such a great one to read and discuss with kids about putting yourself in other people's shoes, talking about issues like immigration and workers' rights, and about just having compassion for people in general, in addition to being just a really wonderfully told story. Number 7 is what is your favorite middle grade book cover? And there are a lot of beautiful ones, but again, I have a one book rule for this tag, and that is Midsummer's Mayhem by Rajani LaRocca. I also love this book. This was one of my favorite books I read last year. It's a retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream, featuring baking magic and an Indian American main character, and really lovely family relationships, and I do just really love this cover. I love the art and the color palette. There's a little bit of gold like foil at the top, and I think it also really accurately represents the book, which is also obviously nice. And question number 8 is what is your favorite middle grade book to screen adaptation? So I actually had a hard time with this one because even though I have watched some book to movie adaptations, a lot of them weren't middle grade books for whatever reason. But the one I came up with is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is an adaptation of the second Chronicles of Narnia book, or first if you're going in publication order, I think. But I just adore this movie so much. I think is it from like 2004 maybe? I don't remember. So this is like in that series of 3 movies that they made. Prince Caspian was the second one, which was okay. It had its moments. And Voyage of the Dawn Treader was third, and it was bad. I don't like that one at all. But Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe is fantastic. I just think it did such a good job of capturing the atmosphere of the book. I think the casting was excellent. I loved the way it was shot. The score was also really lovely. This is just such a great example of a book to movie adaptation because they added their own little touches, but for the most part, they kept what made the book special while giving it to us in a different medium. I think they did a great job of showing that sense of wonder and magic, but also the emotional or serious moments. I think they just did a beautiful job at this movie. I just love it. I love the book and I love the movie. Okay, everybody, so that was the middle grade book tag. Thank you again, Amanda, for tagging me. I'm going to tag Kier from Kier the Scrivener, Hannah from Snow White Reader, Katie from A Sea of Tomes, Julia from Shakespeare and Such, and of course anybody else who would like to do this tag. Spread the middle grade love. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!